The glass doors of Harrington Enterprises shimmered under the early morning sun, reflecting the restless pulse of New York City in 2025. This wasn't just a building. It was a monument to wealth, a towering symbol of ambition where multi-billion-dollar real estate deals were sealed over handcrafted lattes and whispered promises. Inside, the air buzzed with the clatter of designer heels, the rustle of tailored suits, and the faint arrogance of employees who believed they were the elite of corporate America. But beneath the polished surface, something ugly festered, rumors of discrimination, of a culture that favored the privileged few while trampling the rest. And today, someone was here to see it all firsthand. A single motorcycle roared to a stop. Outside, its engine slicing through the corporate quiet like a knife. The rider, a lean black man in a faded hoodie, dark cargo pants, and scuffed sneakers, swung off the bike with easy grace. A worn-out backpack slumped over one shoulder, its frayed straps a stark contrast to the Louis Vuitton briefcases gliding past. This was Malik Thompson, 34 years old, the firstborn son of James Harrington, the billionaire owner of Harrington Enterprises. But to the world around him, he was invisible, a stranger who didn't belong in their gleaming empire of glass and steel. Malik adjusted his fedora, tilting it low over his eyes, and took a slow breath. He'd been away for years, building a life in London, earning an MBA from Wharton, and honing his skills in global real estate markets. But the whispers had reached him across the Atlantic. Stories of unfair promotions, of the employees of color being sidelined, of a company his father built but no longer truly saw. His mother, a black woman who'd once worked in this very building, had faced the same cold stares, the same quiet slights. She'd left this world too soon, but her lessons lingered in Malik's blood. Today, he wasn't here as the heir. He was here as a ghost, ready to uncover the truth. As he stepped toward the entrance, the weight of a dozen eyes fell on him. A receptionist in a crisp blazer glanced up, her smile faltering. Two executives in Armani suits paused mid-conversation, their brows furrowing as if Malik's presence was a glitch in their perfect system. He felt it, the unspoken assumption that he was out of place, a delivery boy who'd wandered too far from the service entrance. Have you ever walked into a room and felt the air shift, like everyone's already decided you don't belong? Drop a comment below if you've been there, because Malik was about to live it. Inside, the lobby gleamed with marble floors and chandeliers that cost more than most people's homes. Employees moved with purpose, clutching overpriced oat milk, lattes, and tapping away on sleek laptops. The walls displayed framed articles praising Harrington Enterprises for its luxury developments. But Malik's eyes caught something else. A small protest poster taped near the elevator, hastily torn down but still legible. Hashtag Harrington Hypocrisy, it read, a nod to a recent lawsuit filed by a former employee of color who'd accused the company of systemic bias. The case had gone viral on X, sparking heated debates about diversity, equity, and inclusion DEI. Policies that some called progress and others branded as corporate theater. Malik's lips twitched. The truth was closer than they knew. Then came the first test. Brad Coleman, senior operations manager, strode across the lobby like he owned it. Tall, stocky, with slicked back hair and a Rolex glinting on his wrist. Brad was the kind of man who measured worth by appearances. To him, Malik was a smudge on the company's pristine image. Brad's eyes narrowed as he took in Malik's hoodie and backpack, a smirk curling his lips. "Hey, buddy," he called, his voice loud enough to draw attention. "Deliveries go around back. This isn't the loading dock." The lobby went quiet. A few employees chuckled, others glanced away, but all waited for Malik's response. He paused, turning slowly to meet Brad's gaze. Those eyes, sharp, unflinching, held a quiet power that made Brad's smirk flicker. Just for a second. "Actually," Malik said, his voice calm but clear, "I'm not here for a delivery. I was wondering if you had any job openings." Brad blinked, caught off guard. The idea of this casually dressed black man seeking work in his domain was almost laughable. A receptionist nearby, Janitor, leaned forward, her manicured nails clicking on her keyboard as she exchanged a glance with Brad. "A job?" Brad snorted, folding his arms. "Here? At Harrington Enterprises?" His tone dripped with disbelief, as if Malik had asked to join the board of directors. Malik nodded, unfazed. "Yeah, I'm in need of work. Anything you've got." His words were deliberate, his posture relaxed, but there was something in his tone, a hint of steel beneath the humility that made Jennifer pause her typing. The other employees whispered, their amusement growing. To them, Malik was a curiosity, a man who didn't know his place. Brad's smirk returned, wider now. He glanced at Jennifer, who was already stifling a giggle. "Well, let's see what we can do for you," he said, his voice thick with condescension. "Jennifer, check the system. Any openings for—" "What's your name?" "Malik," he replied, his eyes never leaving Brad's. Jennifer's fingers flew across her keyboard, her lips twitching as she scanned the screen. "Oh, look at that," she said, her voice syrupy with mock surprise. "We do have one position available." She paused for effect, glancing at Brad, who was already grinning. "The janitorial team is hiring." The word landed like a punch, and the lobby erupted in quiet laughter. An executive near the coffee machine shook his head, amused. A young intern smirked, snapping a quick photo of the scene, likely for a snarky post on X. To them, this was entertainment, a nobody daring to dream above his station, only to be put back in his place. Brad crossed his arms, savoring the moment. "So, Malik," he said, drawing out the name like it was a joke. "You wanted an opportunity, right? What do you say?" For a moment, Malik said nothing. He tilted his head, as if weighing the offer. But his eyes swept the room, memorizing every face, every laugh, every silent judgment. Then, with a slow, knowing smile, he nodded. "I'll take it." Brad burst out laughing, the sound echoing off the marble walls. Jennifer clapped a hand over her mouth, her eyes gleaming with delight. The other employees shook their heads, already dismissing Malik as a fool who'd accepted a dead-end job in their glittering world. But they didn't see it, the spark in Malik's eyes, the quiet confidence in his stance. They had no idea what they'd just done. They just handed the heir to Harrington Enterprises a front-row seat to their darkest truths. As Malik followed Jennifer to the HR office to sign paperwork, the lobby buzzed with gossip. "Can you believe that guy?" One employee whispered. "A janitor? Here?" Another posted on X. "Just saw some dude in a hoodie get hired as a janitor at Harrington. Talk about aiming low. Hashtag corporate life." But Malik didn't flinch. He slipped his hands into his pockets, his backpack slung over one shoulder, and walked away with the calm of a man who knew exactly what he was doing. This was only the beginning. Imagine stepping into a place where every glance, every word, is a reminder that you're unwelcome. Have you ever faced a moment where you had to swallow your pride just to keep going? Drop a comment and share your story, because Malik's journey is about to get a lot harder and a lot more explosive. Smash that like button, subscribe to Legacy Stories, and turn on notifications to find out what happens next. Where are you watching from? Let us know below. The fluorescent lights of Harrington Enterprises buzzed overhead, casting a sterile glow across the polished marble floors of the 47th floor executive suite. It was day one of Malik Thompson's new life as a janitor, and the weight of his disguise settled heavier than the mop in his hands. Dressed in a faded blue uniform, a name tag reading Malik pinned crookedly to his chest, He pushed a cleaning cart through the bustling corridors of New York's most prestigious real estate empire. To the employees rushing past with their artisanal coffees and Bluetooth earbuds, he was invisible, a shadow in a world of glass and ambition. But Malik saw everything. His supervisor, Claire Donovan, was waiting for him at the end of the hallway, her arms crossed and her lips pursed into a permanent scowl. Blonde, tall, and sharp as a switchblade, Claire had been with Harrington Enterprises for a decade, climbing from receptionist to head of facilities by wielding her authority like a weapon. To her, janitors were the bottom rung, and Malik, with his dark skin and calm demeanor, was the lowest of them all. "You're late," she snapped, her voice cutting through the hum of the office. "I don't care if it's your first day. You don't waste my time." Malik glanced at his watch, 8:59 a.m., 1 minute before his shift officially started. He met Claire's glare with a neutral nod. "Won't happen again," he said, his tone steady, almost too calm. Claire's eyes narrowed, as if his composure was a personal affront. She pointed to a conference room, its glass walls gleaming under the chandeliers. "Start there. And don't half-ass it. This isn't some corner store. People noticed dirt here." As Malik pushed his cart toward the room, he felt the weight of her stare, the unspoken assumption that he'd fail. He'd expected this, had prepared for it, but the reality still stung. His mother's voice echoed in his mind. Asterisk. "They'll try to make you small, Malik. Don't let them." He gripped the mop handle tighter and got to work, his movements deliberate, precise. The glass table sparkled under his cloth. The floors gleamed like mirrors, but Claire wasn't satisfied. She stormed in 10 minutes later, her heels clicking like gunfire. "This is a mess," she barked, pointing to an invisible smudge. "Do it again. Properly." Malik paused, his rag hovering over the table. "I just cleaned it," he said, his voice even, but Claire's lips curled into a sneer. "Don't get smart with me," she said, loud enough for a passing executive to glance over. "Your kind always thinks they can cut corners." The words landed like a slap, and Malik's jaw tightened, but he only nodded. "Yes, ma'am," he said, wiping the table again, his eyes scanning her face, memorizing every line of her contempt. That afternoon, Brad Coleman made his presence known. Malik was scrubbing a hallway near the executive lounge when Brad sauntered by, a paper coffee cup in his hand. Without breaking stride, he accidentally tipped the cup, letting dark liquid splatter across the floor Malik had just cleaned. "Oops," Brad said, his smirk wide as he glanced back. "Guess you missed a spot, kid." A few employees nearby chuckled, one snapping a quick photo for X with a caption, "Janitor's gonna have a long day. #Harrington Hustle." Malik exhaled slowly, his hands steady as he mopped up the mess. Not yet, he told himself. Not yet. The days blurred into a rhythm of slights and humiliations. Claire hovered over Malik's every move, criticizing his speed, his technique, his very presence. "You're too slow," she'd snap as he emptied a trash bin. "This desk is streaky," she'd complain, even when it gleamed. Brad was worse, making a game of dropping candy wrappers or spilling drinks right after Malik finished cleaning. "Gotta keep you busy, right?" he'd say, winking at his colleagues, who laughed or looked away. But not everyone joined in. Sophia Alvarez, a soft-spoken accountant with warm brown eyes, watched from her cubicle, her expression uneasy. Once, when Claire wasn't looking, she slipped Malik a bottle of water and whispered, "I'm sorry about her." Malik smiled. Faintly. "It's all good," he said, but his eyes said something else. "I'm watching." Every night, Malik retreated to a small apartment in Brooklyn, far from the glittering Manhattan skyline. There, under the dim glow of a desk lamp, he opened a worn leather notebook and jotted down what he'd seen. Claire's biting remarks, Brad's deliberate cruelty, the way employees of color were given menial tasks while white colleagues were fast-tracked to promotions. He noted the whispers in the break room, the complaints about day nonsense that echoed recent X debates, where users argued over whether diversity policies were saving companies or ruining them. One post, trending under hashtag Harrington Hypocrisy, read, "Heard Harringtons all talk on day A. Same old boys club inside." Malik's pen paused. They weren't wrong. Asterisk. The 47th floor of Harrington Enterprises buzzed with the frenetic energy of a Friday afternoon, but for Malik Thompson, the world was a tunnel of focus. 3 weeks into his role as a janitor, the 34-year-old heir to the multi-billion-dollar real estate empire had mastered the art of invisibility. His blue uniform blended into the background as he pushed a cleaning cart through the gleaming corridors, dodging executives who didn't spare him a glance. But the slights from Claire Donovan and Brad Coleman were anything but invisible. They were deliberate, cutting deeper with each passing day. And today, the cracks in Malik's carefully crafted disguise were starting to show. Malik was wiping down a glass conference table when Claire stormed in, her blonde hair pulled tight and her eyes blazing with disdain. "This is unacceptable," she snapped, pointing to the table, which sparkled under the overhead lights. Malik paused, his rag hovering midair. "I cleaned it 10 minutes ago," he said, his voice calm but firm. Claire's lips curled into a sneer, loud enough to draw a few curious glances from the hallway. "You missed a spot," she said, grabbing a full cup of coffee from a nearby tray. Without hesitation, she flung the dark liquid across the table, splattering it onto the glass and dripping onto the floor. "Now clean it again." The room went quiet. 2 employees passing by froze, their eyes widening. One pulled out a phone, likely recording for a quick X post. Malik stood still, his jaw tight as the coffee pooled at his feet. Claire crossed her arms, her smirk daring him to react. "Well?" she said. "What are you waiting for?" Malik's eyes met hers, and for a moment, something flickered in his gaze, a quiet storm she didn't understand. Then he knelt, rag in hand, and began wiping the table, his movements deliberate, almost meditative. The employees whispered. One posting on X, "Supervisor just owned the new janitor. Brutal. Hashtag Harrington vibes double quotes," but Malik didn't flinch. He was playing a longer game. Later, in the break room, Brad Coleman took his turn. Malik was restocking paper towels when Brad sauntered in, tossing a crumpled napkin onto the floor he'd just swept. "You're slacking, kid," Brad said, his voice loud enough to draw chuckles from a group of interns nearby. "This place is a pigsty." Malik straightened, meeting Brad's smirk with a level gaze. "I'll get it," he said, bending to pick up the napkin. Brad leaned closer, his voice dropping to a mocking whisper. "That's right, boy. Know your place." The word landed like a punch, and the interns went silent, sensing the line Brad had crossed. Malik's hand paused, his eyes locking onto Brad's, but he said nothing. Not yet, but not everyone stayed silent. Sophia Alvarez, the accountant who'd shown Malik kindness before, was at a nearby table, her lunch untouched. Her hands clenched as she watched Brad's performance, her warm brown eyes flashing with anger. As Brad left, laughing with the interns, Sophia stood and approached Malik. "That was wrong," she said, her voice low but firm. "He can't talk to you like that." Malik smiled faintly, tossing the napkin into the trash. "He thinks he can," he said, his tone cryptic. Sophia hesitated, then pressed a granola bar into his hand. "You're stronger than they know," she whispered before walking away. Malik's eyes followed her, a spark of respect flickering in his chest. That evening, the first crack in Malik's disguise appeared. He was in the copy room, emptying a shredder, when a young analyst, Emma, rushed in, frantic. "Damn it," she muttered, rifling through papers on a table. This. Market reports due in an hour, and it's all wrong. Malik glanced at the document, a projection for a Brooklyn development project, littered with errors. Without thinking, he spoke. Your numbers for the Williamsburg lot are off, he said, his voice casual. The zoning laws changed last month. You're overestimating the buildable square footage by 15%. Emma froze, her eyes darting to Malik. How? How do you know that? She asked, her voice tinged with suspicion. Malik cursed himself inwardly, realizing his slip. He shrugged, wiping his hands on his uniform. Read it somewhere, he said, turning back to the shredder. But Emma wasn't convinced. She stared at him, her brow furrowing, then grabbed her papers and left. Later, in the break room, she whispered to David, a mid-level manager who'd been watching Malik closely. That janitor just corrected my report, she said, like he knows real estate better than me. David's eyes narrowed. Something's off about that guy, he muttered. Back in his Brooklyn apartment, Malik sat under a flickering lamp, his leather notebook open. He scrawled details of the day. Claire's coffee stunt, Brad's racial jab, Sophia's quiet rebellion. He flipped to a news app on his phone, where #Harrington Hypocrisy was trending again. A new post read, Harrington's DA training is a sham. Minorities are stuck in low jobs, and management laughs about it. Malik's pen hovered over the page. He'd seen it. The way Black and Latino employees were relegated to support roles. The way Claire and Brad ruled through intimidation. His mother's face flashed in his mind, her stories of being dismissed in these same halls. He closed the notebook, his resolve hardening. The marble halls of Harrington Enterprises gleamed under the soft glow of chandeliers. But for Malik Thompson, the air was heavy with hostility. A month into his role as a janitor, the 34-year-old heir to the multi-billion-dollar real estate empire had become a target for Claire Donovan and Brad Coleman, whose relentless campaign to demean him grew bolder by the day. The New York skyline sparkled beyond the glass walls, a symbol of ambition, but inside, the corporate machine churned with prejudice, and Malik was its latest victim. Yet, beneath his faded blue uniform, a fire burned one that was about to ignite. Malik was polishing a conference room door when Claire's voice sliced through the morning quiet. You call this clean? She barked, her blonde ponytail swinging as she pointed to the flawless glass. Her sharp blue eyes glinted with malice, and her volume drew a small crowd of employees, their laptops tucked under their arms like shields. Malik straightened, his rag still in hand. I just finished it, he said, his voice steady, but Claire scoffed, loud enough for the onlookers to hear. Finished? This is a disgrace. Do you even know how to do your job? Or is that too much to expect from you? The emphasis on you was unmistakable, a coded jab at his race that made a few employees shift uncomfortably, one intern emboldened. By Claire's performance, pulled out her phone, likely drafting a snarky X post. Janitor getting roasted again. #Harrington shade. Malik's jaw tightened, but he kept his eyes on Claire. I'll do it again, he said, dipping his rag into the cleaning solution. Claire crossed her arms, her smirk triumphant. And don't dawdle, she snapped. Some of us have real work to do. As she strutted away, her heels clicking like a metronome, Malik wiped the glass, his movements deliberate. He memorized her face, her tone, her every word, a ledger he'd settle soon enough. The harassment didn't stop there. That afternoon, Brad Coleman took his turn in the executive lounge, where Malik was emptying trash bins. Brad, his Rolex glinting under the lights, sauntered in with a group of managers, tossing a half-eaten donut onto the floor Malik had just swept. Mr. Spot Kid, Brad said, his voice dripping with mockery. The managers laughed, one recording the moment. for X with a caption, "Keeping the help busy." Hashtag corporate fun. Malik paused, his hand on the bin, and met Brad's gaze. "You want me to get that?" he asked, his tone deceptively calm. Brad leaned closer, his smirk widening. "That's what we pay you for, isn't it, boy?" The word landed like a slap, and the laughter died. Even the managers glanced away, sensing the line Brad had crossed. Malik bent down, picked up the donut, and dropped it into the trash without a word. But his eyes, sharp, unflinching, locked onto Brad's, and for a moment, Brad's confidence faltered. There was something in Malik's stare that didn't belong to a janitor, something that made the room feel smaller. As Brad led his entourage out, Malik resumed his work, but the encounter lingered, a spark in the powder keg of his patience. Not everyone was complicit. Sophia Alvarez, the accountant who'd shown Malik kindness before, watched from a nearby table, her hands clenched around a coffee cup. She'd had enough of Claire's tirades, Brad's cruelty, and the office's silent acceptance. As Malik pushed his cart past her, Sophia stood, her voice low but firm. "They're wrong to treat you like this," she said, her warm brown eyes flashing with defiance. "You don't have to take it." Malik smiled faintly, adjusting his name tag. "I'm handling it, Sophia. Trust me." She studied him, sensing something beneath his words, then nodded. "Just be careful," she said, returning to her seat. Malik's gaze lingered on her, a flicker of respect in his chest. She was braver than she knew. That evening, in the break room, Sophia overheard a conversation that chilled her. Two managers, emboldened by the hashtag Harrington hypocrisy debates on X, grumbled about day quotas ruining the company. "They're pushing minorities into jobs they don't deserve," one said, glancing at Malik, who was restocking napkins nearby. "Like that guy, probably only here because of some diversity checklist." Sophia's hands trembled, but she stayed silent, knowing speaking up could cost her job. Malik, however, heard every word, his expression unreadable as he slipped out of the room. Back in his Brooklyn apartment, Malik opened his leather notebook under a dim lamp, scrawling the day's events. Claire's public shaming, Brad's racial slur, the manager's day gripes. He pulled up X on his phone, where hashtag Harrington hypocrisy was trending higher. A new post read, "Harrington's a snake pit. Minorities get humiliated daily, and management laughs. Time for a reckoning." Malik's pen paused. He'd seen the pattern: Black and Latino employees stuck in low roles, white colleagues fast-tracked to power. His mother's voice echoed. Asterisk. "They'll try to break you, Malik. Don't let them." He closed the notebook, his resolve a blade. Honed sharp. Asterisk. The hum of Harrington Enterprises' 47th floor was a constant drone. But for Malik Thompson, it was the sound of a battlefield. 5 weeks into his covert mission as a janitor, the 34-year-old heir to the multi-billion-dollar real estate empire moved through the polished corridors with a quiet intensity, his blue uniform a disguise that hid a mind sharper than any in the building. The relentless harassment from Claire Donovan and Brad Coleman had only hardened his resolve. But now, cracks in his carefully crafted facade were beginning to show, and the whispers were growing louder. God had happened in the copy room late in the afternoon, as Malik emptied a paper shredder. Emma, the young analyst who'd been scrambling with a report in Part 2B, burst in, her face flushed with panic. "This is a disaster," she muttered, spreading out a stack of papers on a table. The document was a market analysis for a high-stakes Brooklyn development project, and it was riddled with errors. "If I don't fix this by tomorrow, I'm done," Emma said, oblivious to Malik's presence. He glanced at the papers, his years at Wharton and London real estate firms itching to surface. Against his better judgment, he spoke. "Your vacancy. Rate projections are off," he said, his voice casual but precise. The Brooklyn market's oversaturated. You're underestimating tenant turnover by at least 10%. Emma froze, her eyes snapping to Malik. What? She said, her tone a mix of shock and suspicion. How do you know that? Malik realized his mistake too late, his hand pausing over the shredder. He shrugged, forcing a disarming smile. Just something I read online, he said, turning back to his work. But Emma wasn't buying it. She stared at him, her brow furrowed, then grabbed her papers and hurried out. Later, in the break room, she cornered David, the mid-level manager, who'd been watching Malik closely. The janitor just fixed my report, she whispered. He knew more about Brooklyn real estate than half the analysts here. David's eyes narrowed. Told you, he said. That guy's not what he seems. That evening, Malik's path crossed with Henry, a grizzled maintenance worker who'd been with Harrington Enterprises for 2 decades. Henry, a black man in his late 50s with a weathered face and a quiet dignity, found Malik cleaning a hallway after hours. You're working late, son, Henry said, leaning against a wall. Malik smiled faintly, just trying to keep up. Henry studied him, his eyes sharp despite his age. You remind me of someone, he said, his voice low. Years ago, there was a woman here. Smart, tough, black, worked in accounting, but they treated her like dirt. She was James Harrington's first wife. Malik's hand stilled on his mop. He'd known this moment would come, but hearing it from Henry hit harder than expected. What happened to her? He asked, his voice steady but his heart racing. Henry sighed, his gaze distant. They pushed her out, made her life hell because she didn't fit their mold. She was too good for this place, but they broke her anyway. He paused, looking at Malik. You've got her fire, you know? Be careful, they'll try to snuff it out. Malik nodded, his jaw tight. His mother's story wasn't new, but hearing it here, in these halls, fueled the fire in his chest. The next day, Brad Coleman pushed attention to a breaking point. He'd organized an exclusive, team-building happy hour at a swanky rooftop bar, a networking event meant to impress the company's top brass. Invitations went out to most of the floor's employees, except Malik, the other janitors, and several black and Latino staff. The exclusion was blatant, whispered about in cubicles, and posted on X. Harrington's team building skips the diverse. Team. Shocker. Hashtag Harrington hypocrisy. Malik overheard the chatter as he swept the break room, his expression unreadable, but his notebook waiting. Sophia Alvarez couldn't stay silent. During a staff meeting, as Brad boasted about the event, Sophia stood, her voice trembling but clear. Why weren't all employees invited? She asked, her eyes locked on Brad. The room went quiet, and Claire, sitting nearby, shot her a venomous glare. Brad smirked, leaning back in his chair. It's for key players, Sophia. Not everyone makes the cut. The implication was clear, and Sophia's face flushed with anger. That's unfair, she said, her voice rising. You're excluding people based on their roles or something else. Claire cut in, her tone sharp. Know your place, Sophia. Don't make trouble. But Sophia didn't back down, her hands shaking as she sat, her defiance a spark in the room. Malik, cleaning a nearby window, watched it all, his rag moving in slow, deliberate strokes. Sophia's courage was a light in the darkness, but it came with a cost. As the meeting ended, Claire pulled Sophia aside, her voice a low hiss. You're on thin ice, she warned. Malik's eyes followed them, his notebook growing heavier with every incident. That night, in his Brooklyn apartment, Malik scrawled in his leather notebook. Sophia's stand, Brad's exclusion, Henry's story. He pulled up X where hashtag Harrington hypocrisy was trending higher, with a new post. Harrington's latest? Leaving out minority staff from team events. They my ass. Malik's pen paused. The company his father built was rotting from within, and he was closer than ever to exposing it. The 47th floor of Harrington Enterprises thrummed with a nervous energy, as if the glass walls themselves sensed a storm brewing. It was a crisp morning in New York City, 6 weeks into Malik Thompson's covert mission as a janitor, and the air was thick with anticipation. The 34-year-old heir to the multi-billion-dollar real estate empire had endured relentless humiliation from Claire Donovan and Brad Coleman, their cruelty a mirror to the company's darker truths. But today, everything was about to change. A single phone call had set the office ablaze. James Harrington, the billionaire CEO, was coming to the headquarters to make a game-changing announcement. Employees buzzed with excitement, straightening ties and organizing desks, their voices a mix of speculation and ambition. "He's probably promoting someone," an analyst whispered, eyeing Brad Coleman, who stood near the elevator, his Rolex glinting as he adjusted his cufflinks. Brad's smirk was wider than ever, his mind racing with visions of shaking James Harrington's hand, maybe even securing a vice president role. Claire Donovan, her blonde ponytail as tight as her grip, on power, hovered nearby, smoothing her blouse and practicing her smile. To them, this was their moment to shine. To Malik, pushing a cleaning cart in his faded blue uniform, it was the endgame. The whispers on X amplified the tension. A trending post under #HarringtonHypocrisy read, "Big boss coming to HQ today. Bet it's just more day lip service? #corporate gangs." Malik had seen it, scrolling through his phone the night before in his Brooklyn apartment. The hashtag had exploded in recent weeks, fueled by leaks about the company's exclusionary practices and a recent lawsuit from a former black employee alleging systemic bias. Malik's leather notebook, now thick with notes on Claire's venom, Brad's slurs, and the office's rigged hierarchy sat heavy in his backpack. Today, those pages would speak. Claire, ever eager to assert her dominance, chose this moment for her final strike. Malik was wiping down a glass conference table in the executive suite, its surface already gleaming when she stormed in, a full coffee cup in hand. A small crowd of employees lingered nearby, drawn by the promise of James Harrington's arrival. "This table's a disgrace," Claire snapped, her voice cutting through the chatter. Malik paused, his rag hovering, and met her gaze. "I just cleaned it," he said, his tone calm but edged with steel. Claire's lips curled into a sneer, sensing an audience. "You call this clean?" she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Without warning, she flung the coffee across the table, the dark liquid splattering onto the glass and dripping onto the floor. "Clean it again," she barked, crossing her arms. "And do it right this time?" The room went silent. Employees froze, their eyes wide with shock. Sophia Alvarez, standing near the doorway, clenched her fists, her face flushed with anger. She took a step forward, but Brad Coleman, leaning against a wall, shot her a warning glance. An intern pulled out a phone, recording the scene. Likely for an ex-post, supervisor just dunked on the janitor. Savage. #Harrington Showdown. Malik stood still, the coffee pooling at his feet, his eyes locked on Claire's. For a moment, the air crackled with tension, and Claire's smirk faltered, as if she sensed something dangerous in his silence. Then, with a slow, deliberate nod, Malik knelt rag in hand and began wiping the table. The crowd whispered, some amused, others uneasy. Sophia couldn't stay quiet. "This is wrong," she said, her voice trembling but clear, stepping into the room. "You can't treat him like that." Claire spun on her, her eyes blazing. "Mind your business, Sophia," she hissed, "or you'll be next." Brad chuckled, adding, "Let the help do his job." But Malik, still kneeling, glanced at Sophia, his eyes conveying a quiet gratitude. He resumed cleaning, his movements steady, but his mind was a storm. The ledger was closed. The reckoning was here. Then it happened. The elevator doors dinged. and the room fell silent. James Harrington stepped out, a tall, commanding figure in a sleek gray suit, his presence radiating authority. Behind him trailed assistants, bodyguards, and senior executives, their steps precise, their faces tense. Employees straightened, their anticipation palpable. Brad puffed out his chest. Claire adjusted her smile, and the whispers stopped. James walked to the center of the floor, his sharp blue eyes scanning the room. He smiled, a rare gesture that sent a ripple through the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice smooth yet powerful. "Today is a historic day for Harrington Enterprises." The room held its breath. Brad leaned forward, eager, certain this was his moment. Claire clasped her hands, her eyes shining with ambition. James continued, his voice steady. "For years, I've built this company with a vision of greatness. But greatness means integrity, and today, I'm proud to announce that my firstborn son is here, in this building, ready to lead us into the future." Silence. A wave of confusion swept through the room. "Firstborn son?" Whispers erupted. "I thought his son was that kid from his second wife," an analyst muttered. "Who is it?" Brad's heart raced, his eyes darting to the executives in the back, expecting a young white man in a tailored suit. Claire nodded to herself, confident it was someone from the right crowd. But James's next words shattered everything. "Malik," James said, his voice ringing clear. "Come here." Time stopped. Every eye turned, searching, until they landed on him. Malik Thompson, still in his janitor's uniform, still holding his rag, standing right where Claire had left him. Asterisk the silence on the 47th floor of Harrington Enterprises was deafening, a vacuum that swallowed every whisper, every breath. Malik Thompson stood in the center of the executive suite, his janitor's uniform stained with coffee from Claire Donovan's final act of cruelty, his rag still clutched in one hand. The eyes of every employee, executives, analysts, interns were locked on him, their faces a mosaic of shock, disbelief, and dawning horror. James Harrington, the billionaire CEO, had just declared Malik, the man they'd mocked and humiliated for weeks, as his firstborn son and the new leader of their empire. The world they knew was crumbling, and Malik was holding the hammer. Brad Coleman stood frozen near the elevator, his Rolex suddenly feeling like a shackle. His face drained of color, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Claire Donovan, her blonde ponytail as tight as her grip on her fading authority, gasped, her hand flying to her chest as if to hold her heart in place. The room's silence was broken only by a faint whistle from an intern in the back, her phone still recording, the X livestream already exploding with comments. "No way. The janitor is the CEO? Hashtag Harrington bombshell." Malik's eyes swept the room, calm but razor-sharp, memorizing every face, every reaction. He'd waited for this moment, and now it was his. He stepped forward, the rag dropping to the floor with a soft thud, his posture shifting from janitor to commander. "I assume you all have a lot of questions," Malik said, his voice smooth, steady, and laced with an authority that made the air crackle. The room remained silent, every breath held. Brad's hand shook, his mind scrambling for an escape. Claire's eyes darted, searching for a lifeline that wasn't there. Malik let the silence stretch, a deliberate pause that weighed on their guilt. Then he turned to his father, James Harrington, who stood beside him, his expression a mix of pride and shame. James nodded, a silent handoff of power, and the room belonged to Malik. "My name is Malik Thompson Harrington," he said, his voice carrying like a wave across the stunned crowd. "I am the firstborn son of James Harrington, and as of today, I am your new CEO." The words landed like thunder, and gasps rippled through the room. An analyst dropped her coffee cup, the liquid pooling unnoticed. Brad's knees buckled slightly, his smirk long gone. Claire's face turned ghostly pale, her lips trembling. Malik paced slowly, his janitor's uniform a stark contrast to his commanding presence. For the past 6 weeks, he continued, I've worked here as a janitor. I wanted to see how this company, my company, treats people when they think no one's watching. His eyes landed on Brad, who flinched as if struck. Brad Coleman, Malik said, his voice dropping to a deadly calm. You mocked me, called me boy, threw trash on the floor I'd just cleaned. You did it because you thought I was beneath you. Brad's mouth opened, but no words came out. His hands clenched, his career flashing before his eyes. Malik turned to Claire, whose face was now bright red, her eyes wide with panic. And you, Claire Donovan, he said, his tone softer but no less lethal. You threw coffee on the table I'd cleaned, humiliated me in front of everyone, and told me I was nothing. He let the words hang, the weight of their actions crushing them. Then he asked the question that would haunt them forever. If you had known who I was, Malik said, his eyes piercing first Brad, then Claire, would you have treated me the way you did? Silence. A long, agonizing silence. Brad's head lowered, his voice barely a whisper. I didn't know, he stammered. Claire nodded frantically, her voice cracking. It was just company policy, she blurted, but the excuse sounded hollow even to her. Malik smirked, a cold, knowing smile. That's the point, he said. You didn't know. And that's why you're standing here, exposed. The room erupted in murmurs, employees exchanging stunned glances. Sophia Alvarez, standing near the back, her eyes shining with quiet pride, watched Malik command the space. The intern's live stream was blowing up on X, with comments flooding. This is unreal. Justice served. Hashtag Harrington CEO. But Malik wasn't done. He turned to the crowd, his voice rising. I've seen how this company operates. I've seen the discrimination, the favoritism, the way people are judged by their skin or their role. That ends today. James Harrington stepped forward, his expression unreadable but heavy with regret. He'd built this company, but he'd trusted the wrong people to run it. Now, his son was taking the reins, and the truth was undeniable. Malik's gaze softened briefly as he looked at his father, then hardened as he faced the employees again. This company will be better, he said, not because of me, but because we'll demand better from everyone. The 47th floor of Harrington Enterprises stood frozen in the wake of Malik Thompson's revelation, the air thick with shock and the weight of shattered assumptions. The 34-year-old heir, still clad in his coffee-stained janitor's uniform, had just been declared the new CEO by his father, James Harrington, the billionaire who'd built this real estate empire. The room, once buzzing with ambition and arrogance, now crackled with tension. Brad Coleman, the smug operations manager, stood pale and trembling, his Rolex a mocking reminder of his misplaced confidence. Claire Donovan, the venomous facilities supervisor, clutched the edge of a table, her face a mask of panic. The employees, executives, analysts, interns watched in stunned silence, their phones buzzing with X notifications as the live stream of Malik's bombshell went viral. Janitor turned CEO. Harrington's done. Hashtag Harrington bombshell. Malik paced slowly, his eyes sharp, his presence commanding the room like a general on a battlefield. The rag he'd dropped minutes ago lay forgotten on the floor, a symbol of the role he'd played to expose the company's rot. Sophia Alvarez, the accountant who'd shown him kindness, stood near the back, her eyes shining with quiet pride. David and Emma, the manager and analyst who'd suspected Malik wasn't just a janitor, exchanged glances, their earlier doubts now confirmed. But for Brad and Claire, the world was collapsing, and Malik was about to deliver the final blow. He stopped pacing, his gaze locking onto Brad. Brad Coleman, Malik said, his voice calm but cutting like a blade. You laughed in my face, called me boy, made it your mission to humiliate me. You thought you were untouchable. Brad's hand shook, his mouth opening to speak, but Malik raised a hand, silencing him. You're not. He turned to Claire, whose face was now ghostly white, her eyes darting for an escape. Claire Donovan, Malik continued, his tone softer but no less lethal. You threw coffee on a table I'd cleaned, belittled me in front of everyone, told me I was nothing. You thought you had power. He paused, letting the words sink in. You were wrong. The room held its breath. James Harrington stepped forward, his gray suit a stark contrast to Malik's uniform, his expression heavy with regret. He'd trusted people like Brad and Claire to run his company, but their actions had shamed him. Malik, James said, his voice steady but tinged with sorrow. What do you think should be done? The question was a formality, a public handoff of authority, but it carried the weight of decades of trust betrayed. Malik didn't hesitate. Brad Coleman, he said, his voice ringing clear. Your employment with Harrington Enterprises is terminated, effective immediately. Brad's knees buckled, a choked no escaping his lips. Please, sir, I didn't know. He stammered, his voice cracking. Malik's eyes were unflinching. That's why you're leaving, he said. You didn't know who I was, but you chose to treat me like less than human. Brad's face crumpled, his career in ashes as employees whispered, some nodding in approval, others too stunned to react. Malik turned to Claire, who was trembling, her hands gripping her dress like a lifeline. Claire Donovan, he said, his voice steady. Your position as facility supervisor is revoked. You are no longer employed here. Claire let out a strangled gasp, her eyes wide with desperation. Sir, please, she blurted, her voice breaking. I was just following protocol. I didn't mean. Malik cut her off with a raised hand. You meant every word, he said, his tone final. You made your choices. Now live with them. Claire's shoulders slumped, her authority stripped away in front of the very people she'd once lorded over. The room erupted in murmurs, the X-live stream flooding with comments. Justice. Harrington's cleaning house. Hashtag new CEO. An intern. In the back clapped, then stopped, realizing the room's tension. Malik's gaze swept over the employees. Some of them lowered their heads, guilt settling in. But he wasn't done. Not all of you stood by, he said, his voice softening. Some of you showed kindness when it wasn't easy. His eyes found Sofia Alvarez, who stood straighter, her breath catching. Sofia Alvarez, Malik said, a faint smile breaking through. You spoke up when others didn't. You showed courage. Effective immediately, you're promoted to facilities manager. Gasps rippled through the room. Sophia's eyes filled with tears, her hand covering her mouth. Thank you, sir, she whispered, her voice trembling with gratitude. Employees exchanged stunned glances, some whispering about day of favoritism, but Malik's presence silenced their doubts. He turned to David, the manager who'd suspected his true identity. David, he said, your fairness didn't go unnoticed. You'll lead a new task force on workplace equity. David nodded, his face a mix of pride and relief. Malik faced the crowd, his voice rising with purpose. This company has lost its way, he said, his words cutting through the murmurs. I've seen how you treat those you think are beneath. I felt it every insult, every slight, every assumption based on my skin or my uniform. That ends now. He paused, letting the weight settle. Effective immediately, Harrington Enterprises will implement mandatory Day training conducted by an independent firm. We'll audit every promotion, every hire, to ensure fairness. We'll partner with community organizations to support minority employees. Respect isn't a privilege, it's the foundation of what we'll build. The room was silent, the employees absorbing the magnitude of his words. Some nodded, inspired. Others shifted uncomfortably, fearing their own actions would be scrutinized. On X, the hashtag Harrington Reform trended alongside hashtag Harrington Hypocrisy, with posts like, "New CEO dropping truth bombs. This is how you change a company." James Harrington watched his son, his chest rising with pride, but also shame for the company he'd let falter, for the son he'd failed to protect from its flaws. He stepped forward, placing a hand on Malik's shoulder. "You're the future," he said quietly, a public acknowledgement that sealed Malik's authority. Malik's eyes swept the room one last time. "This isn't about revenge," he said, his voice steady but powerful. "It's about accountability. It's about building a company where everyone rises when we lift each other up." The words landed like a promise, and for the first time, the employees saw not just a CEO, but a leader. Sophia wiped her eyes. David stood taller, and even the skeptics felt the shift. The company wasn't just changing, it was being reborn. 1 year had passed since Malik Thompson stood in a janitor's uniform on the 47th floor of Harrington Enterprises, revealing himself as the new CEO and shattering the illusions of a company steeped in prejudice. The New York skyline still glittered beyond the glass walls, but the air inside was different, lighter, cleaner, as if the weight of decades of bias had begun to lift. Under Malik's leadership, Harrington Enterprises was no longer just a real estate titan. It was a beacon of change, its transformation a trending topic on X under hashtag Harrington Reborn. But change, as Malik knew, came with resistance, and the battle was far from over. The company had undergone a seismic shift. Mandatory DI training, led by an independent firm, had reshaped workplace culture, with employees learning to confront their biases. An audit of promotions and hires, overseen by Sofia Alvarez, now facilities manager, had uncovered disparities that were swiftly corrected, elevating Black, Latino, and other minority staff to roles they'd long been denied. Partnerships with community organizations provided mentorship and training, earning Harrington a prestigious diversity award. X posts celebrated the change. Harrington's walking the talk. New CEO's the real deal. Hashtag Harrington Reborn. Malik, now 35, had become a symbol of hope, gracing magazine covers and trending as a voice for equity in corporate America. But not everyone cheered. Brad Coleman, the disgraced former manager, hadn't faded quietly. A month after his termination, he launched a smear campaign on X, rallying a group of former employees to accuse Malik of reverse discrimination. Their posts under hashtag Harrington Woke Fail claimed Malik's reforms favored minorities unfairly, tapping into 2025's heated debates over DEI policies. "Harrington's gone soft," Brad tweeted, his bitterness palpable. "New CEOs playing the race card to ruin a great company." The campaign gained traction among conservative X users, threatening to tarnish Malik's vision. Pundits on X Spaces debated, was Malik a reformer or a divisive figure? Malik faced the storm head-on. In a live X interview, streamed to millions, he sat in a sleek office, his tailored suit a far cry from his janitor's uniform. "This isn't about favoring anyone," he said, his voice steady, his eyes piercing the camera. "It's about fairness. For too long, people were judged by their skin, their role, their accent. I'm building a company where talent wins. Period." He addressed Brad directly. "You had your chance to lead with integrity. You chose hate. That's on you." The internet erupted, with hashtag Malik Speaks trending globally. Supporters posted, "CEO just buried the haters. Respect. Hashtag Harrington Reborn." The crisis faded, Brad's campaign losing steam as Malik's truth resonated. The transformation wasn't just corporate. Malik and James Harrington, his father, launched the Harrington Thompson Scholarship Fund, honoring Malik's late mother, a Black woman who'd faced discrimination in these very halls. The fund supported young people of color pursuing careers in business, with its first recipient celebrated at a gala in Manhattan. James, his hair grayer but his pride evident, spoke at the event, his voice thick with emotion. "I failed my son and his mother by letting this company stray," he said. "Malik's shown me what leadership means. This is his legacy." Malik, standing beside him, shook his father's hand, a moment captured on X. Father and son rewriting history. #Harrington Legacy. One evening, Malik stood on the rooftop of Harrington Enterprises, the city's lights sprawling below. He pulled out his phone, posting on X. "Change starts with respect. For yourself, for others, for what's right. We're just getting started. #Harrington Reborn." The post went viral, a testament to his journey from invisible janitor to transformative leader. His mother's voice echoed in his mind. Asterisk. "They'll try to make you small, Malik. Don't let them." He hadn't, and he never would. This story isn't just about one man's triumph. It's a lesson in humanity. Malik's journey teaches us that respect is universal, not reserved for the powerful. It reminds us that systemic change requires courage, accountability, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. His choice to expose prejudice from the ground up, rather than rule from above, shows that true leadership lifts everyone. In a world still grappling with division, Malik's story is a call to action. Stand up, speak out, and build something better. Have you ever seen someone change a system against the odds? Or taken a stand when it mattered? Drop a comment below and share your story, because every voice counts. If this tale of justice and transformation moved you, smash that like button and subscribe to Legacy Stories for more stories that challenge, inspire, and redefine what's possible. Join our community on X, where we share tales of real change. Where are you watching from? Let us know below, and let's keep the conversation going.